Here is a recording on doing pre-processing with flat darks in PixInsight. So there are several steps that we need to take. The first step is to produce our master dark, and we do that with the image integration process. So we take all of our dark frames, feed them into image integration, and it will give us a master dark. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have our darks, flats, flat darks, and light frames all here ready to go. So let's go ahead and get our darks, which in this case are 20 seconds long to match the 20-second light frames. And in this case, they were all at gain 76 on the ASI 1600. So we have a process icon here set up, ready to go for dark integration. And the differences from default are we're not doing normalization, and we don't care on the weights. And again, down here on pixel rejection, it's no normalization. In my case, I'm using linear fit clipping because I've got 50 darks, so I tend to use linear fit clipping since I usually have more than 25 frames. So let's go ahead and integrate. Okay, so we have our master dark now. You can see there's the slope, the high rejection, the low rejection, and there's our actual dark frame. So let's go ahead and save that. And it's a 20-second dark. So our first step is done. Let's go take a look at our second step, which is to produce the master flat dark. Now, a master flat dark is just like any other dark. It's used to calibrate some other frame. In this case, we're calibrating flats instead of lights. So it's just a dark frame that is at the same exposure and gain as our flat frames. In my particular case, the flat frames were 0.2 seconds at gain 76. So my flat darks are 0.2 seconds at gain 76. So let's go ahead and do that. Since it's a dark integration, we're just going to use the same process icon. Clear that out. Come over and get our flat darks. You can see 0.2 seconds, gain 76. And everything else is the same as it was before. So let's go ahead and integrate. Okay, so we now have our master flat dark. And if you're doing one-shot color, that's all you need to do. And if you're doing mono, then you're going to have a different master flat dark for each filter. And in my case, that was the luminance filter. can get rid of that. Let's go over and see what our next step is, which now that we have the master flat dark, we can take that and the flat frames and run it through image calibration to produce our calibrated flats. So what we have are flats that were at 0.2 seconds. We have a master flat dark that was at 0.2 seconds, which matches that. And we're just going to calibrate out that dark and produce calibrated flats. So we have a flat calibration process icon set up. So let's come get our flats. My output directory, I tend to put them, let me show it this way just to make it more obvious. I tend to put them in the same flat directory under a calibrated subdirectory. That just makes it obvious to me that these calibrated flats go with those flats. And our master dark is that 0.2 second master flat dark that we had created. So there's no master bias and there's no master flat because we're producing flat frames here. Everything else is the same as the default except for ensure that calibrate and optimize are not checked because we're not using bias frames and we don't want any dark scaling going on. That's the whole thing we're trying to avoid. So now we have calibrated our flats, and let's just take a quick look. Here is one of our flats. Let's just take the first one here. Here is one of our calibrated flats. And you can see they look pretty similar, like they should. There's not, at 0.2 seconds, there's not that much dark current to subtract out. Let's go take a look at our next step. So we've produced calibrated flats. So now we're going to make the master flat from those calibrated flats. So we just run those through image integration and get a master flat. So we have a flat integration process icon. And let's go get those calibrated flats. And here are differences from default. We're doing multiplicative normalization. Again, our weights are don't care. And our normalization down here is equalize fluxes. And I think everything else is the same as the default. That error message that just went by is that you're seeing through here about site lat and site long fits keywords is a sequence generator pro bug where it's writing the site information in the wrong format according to the fit standard. So that error is benign and doesn't actually cause us any trouble. Okay, so we have, there's just looking at some of our rejection. And here is our master flat. In my case, that's my luminance master flat. So we can get rid of that. We can get rid of that. Let's look at our next step, which is to calibrate our lights. So we have all of our light frames, our master dark, which matches the lights. So 20 seconds for the lights, 20 seconds for the master dark. Our master flat, we run those through image calibration to produce calibrated lights. You can see at this point, there's no mention of the flat dark. We are done with it. Its sole purpose was to calibrate the flat frames. Once we've done that, it's out of the picture. So let's go to light calibration and come up to our light frames. And I've just chosen the first 50 of my light frames here, so this doesn't take forever. And again, we'll make a calibrated subdirectory there. And we need our master dark, which is our 20-second master dark. You can see our frames here are 20 seconds. And our master flat, which we just produced. And everything else is defaults. And we'll go ahead and calibrate those light frames. Okay, so we have calibrated lights now. Our next step is to do image registration. So we take those calibrated lights, run them through star alignment, and get registered lights. So how you decide how to do that is you need your reference image, which normally you'd pick your best image for our purposes here. I'm just going to grab the first one, just so we don't spend a lot of time adding confusion here. Let's grab our calibrated lights. And the output directory, I'm just going to see we're here in the light calibrated directory. I'm just going to make a subdirectory of that called registered. And everything else is defaults. If you were doing drizzle later, you can generate drizzle data here, but we're not going to bother with that. We'll go ahead and let these become aligned. Okay, we now have registered images. And then our very last step is to produce the master light from those registered lights, again with image integration, and we'll get our master light. So go ahead and come down here and grab our registered lights. In this case, our normalization is additive with scaling. Normally I do some stuff with the subframe selector process, but we'll just change that to noise evaluation. We're going to generate we're not doing anything with drizzle here, and our normalization is scale plus 0 offset. The only other thing I think I do is large scale pixel rejection. So this is going to produce our master for us. Again, the same error message about site lat and site long. Those are not going to cause us any problems. And this takes a while, even on a relatively fast computer, so that's why I cut this down to 50 from the few hundred that we had at 20-second exposures. We end up getting quite a number of frames over the course of a night. So if you were doing one-shot color instead of mono, you would have had to do a debayering step in there that I don't have here. But that's the only other difference. So the key points to remember is that the darks calibrate the lights, the flat darks calibrate the flats, and so the darks match the exposure for the lights, the flat darks match the exposure for the flats. So let's take a quick look at what we got here. And you can see we had a satellite going through there. And there's our image, which doesn't look too bad. So at this point, you can save that and you are set. So let's say you've done this one night and then the next night out you decide that your light frames 20 seconds wasn't long enough and you wanted to do 30 seconds. So you shoot new light frames at 30 seconds. You shoot new dark frames at 30 seconds. But when you go to shoot your flats the next night, they're still 0.2 seconds. So your flat darks are still 0.2 seconds. Just because your light frame exposure changed, that doesn't mean your flat frame exposure changed. And if your flat frame exposure doesn't change, then your dark flat exposure doesn't change. Those are the things that matter. So that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to show here. Hopefully that makes things more clear, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure there's someone out here who knows this stuff better than I do who can. So hope it helps.